All right. Welcome to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie Dows, sitting here in beautiful Chelsea, Quebec, Canada. And guess what? It's Friday and it's the coaches segment, which is super fun. And I've got a really cool episode for you based on what I just did last night in my training program with my clients. So before we get started, how are you? How are you doing? And what's on the agenda for the weekend? I'd love to know. So, first of all, if you're listening to this at work, or maybe you're working out, or maybe you're cycling and listening to me, if you can, this one is a visual one because I'm going to share with you some of the spreadsheets that I have been using with my clients to determine training zones. So today we're going to be talking about FTP tests and zones. Yay! So, but here's the thing. So, I started thinking about, just giving ourselves permission to be amazing. And I just want to tell you how amazing you are. And if you haven't told yourself that in a while, go to the mirror and say, and point at yourself and go, I'm freaking amazing. I am awesome. I'm going to rock 2022 because right now, guys, this is the time to be putting together these plans, these dreams, these aspirations, these events that you want to do with wrapped around your cycling. And it's just a great time to really sit and reflect. And I want to encourage you to do that. And I also, want to encourage you to share with me your goals for next year. Do it on YouTube though, or if you want to DM me on Instagram. So I'd like to know what you're up to for next year. Now, today we're going to talk about FTP tests. And before we get into the FTP test and why and how and what does it mean and all that stuff, and I also said that I'm going to share with you the spreadsheet that I use to use the data from the tests to give out the training zones to my clients. So if you're able to switch over to YouTube, just go in the show notes. Right at the top is the YouTube link to this episode, and hopefully it's downloaded by the time you get to it, because I'm like right on the wire here. So then you can kind of see because I'm going to show you. I'm going to share the spreadsheet on here. Now, before we get into that, testing is an important part of training because you need somewhere to start, and knowing your zones for your heart rate or your power output is important so that it has purpose. Your training has purpose. So, and it also prevents overtraining and undertraining in the same breath, right? Because you could be going out and, jumping on all these group rides and completely just working way out of your zone. And at the end of the day, if you do a lot of those over a lot of weeks, you're going to get overtrained, injured, sick, whatever. But if you have real goals, they require a certain amount of endurance-based building and anaerobic-based building, plus strength training. So this is what I want to offer you guys today. And this is going to be an ongoing thing on my page. You have to go to the show notes to get the link. It's not on my Facebook, my website yet, but it's a $7 for 14 days of strength training. Now, with all the great stuff that you're doing with a wrapped around cycling, ask yourself, have you found space to lift weights, male or female? More importantly for females, because we cannot expect, riding our bike is not going to help us build muscle. Sorry, not even like, I mean, you're going to build muscle development in your legs, but what about the rest of your body? And that's where it's really important. So $7, 14 days free, like 14 days workout trial to work out with me, either live or access all. I have over 100 45-minute quick workouts in the library. So for $7, you can join me live Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7:30 a.m. Eastern. So if that doesn't work for you, then you go straight to the library and you grab one of those 45-minute workouts. They're all the same format. They're all unique. They all target your full body, so legs, core, and abs. And I've been doing those for 2 years, and I've had amazing results. Like my strength training and my performance and my cycling has gone through the roof. Now I have that in my training plan. I have a certain amount of endurance-based building and strength and aerobic. And so it's a balance of everything. So that's why I'm offering you, if you don't have anything and you're wondering what to do, and you're just like you standing there looking at your weights at home and you don't know what to do, or maybe it's, you got some like bands and you don't know what to do, use my program. Like I use minimal equipment, resistance bands, dumbbells, stability ball, that's it. And you can get a solid workout because you need it. Upper body strength. Ladies, you don't want to start looking frail on the upper body and cycling, because the next time you fall, and I don't want to wish it on anybody, what if you break something because you're brittle, you're frail, you don't have no muscles wrapped around those joints, and hips, knees, elbows, these are the things that go, and then they push you out of the game. All right, so let's get into that. So go to the show notes and grab that $7 for 14 days right now before Christmas. It's the best time to start getting and adding that into your training routine. And I'll tell you right now, you get the rest of the year for free, right up to January. And then if you jump into that, you will be asked to join my January challenge. And that's going to be super fun, like wrapped around, like that's just going to be fun. I know you might be thinking, well, I've got so much going on with everything else, but let's just face it, it's fun to do some challenges that are like, step challenges, macro challenges, like a little ab workout challenges, things like that I have in there that are going to be super fun. So that being said, go grab that ridiculously amazing price and let's start working out, because anybody at any level, man or woman, can use those workouts. And trust me, like I research those every night before. So I'm challenged as much as you are, which is the fun part. So anyways, I love doing them. I love putting them together, and I love giving them out to my community and working out live and knowing that men and women are using them on their own time. Okay, so let's start about FTP Test. I have 6 different ways you can get this information. And it's so important if you're going to start training online, anywhere or even outside, that you have a benchmark to work towards and that you schedule in regular, at least every every 6 to 8 weeks, you test yourself. And I'm going to give you some long and short ways of doing it, outside and inside, that you can go out and test and see if you're progressing, see if you're actually increasing your fitness. You know, it would be a shame to be doing all this training and not track your progress, right? So the reason why I'm doing this is because last night in my 16-week program, we always do this the beginning of the 16 weeks, as you know, like we're training for 4 months. So my program is all about skills development. So within your training program or plan or routine, some of it should be skills based, right? You can't just go out and hammer all the time and expect that you're improving, you know, your pedal stroke. Or, I mean, go back to my podcast, my personal coaching podcast episodes, and there's a ton on like pedal stroke efficiency versus economy, picking the right program, like all these things that you can help you. You know, I think there's even one like the top things you need in your program, you know, so that you come out successful. So yesterday, we did a test. And here's the thing. I used to do this inside in a studio, and it was on tack spikes, and they were completely fitted with power, cadence, distance, everything, which is awesome. Because we could effectively run a MAP test, so maximum aerobic power test. And this is something that you will do, you would do inside a studio if you pay for it. So you start off with a certain wattage, you have to keep 90 RPM, and every 3 minutes you add 20 watts until you basically can't go any further. So we did that because it's important. Everybody needs to know what their zones are, 1 to 5, because the next session, that's what we're going to be training on. Okay, this exercise is zone 1. You need to know what your zone 1 is. Okay, so here's 6 different ways. And before you split, after I give you the 6, I'm going to go into the purpose, the best way, best thing to track, like between power and watts, why, and how it's done. And then I'm going to show you the spreadsheet that I created that I sent out my clients. Once they have their data, they can input it and download their zones. So super cool. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Are you guys ready? Okay, so here's the 6 different ones. Now, depending on where you are, you can do number 1 is what we did. We did a 20-minute ramp test. So every 5 minutes, we increase the intensity. Now with all FTP, so that's functional threshold power test or MAP test, maximum aerobic power test, all of these, the baseline is 90 RPM. So you have to keep a baseline of 90 RPM in your cadence as you're applying the resistance and increasing the power, right? Once you start dropping below 90 and you cannot keep that power, you're basically, that's the end of your test. You take your maximum power output and your wattage and your heart rate, those 2 numbers, you put them into the spreadsheet and you get, boom, your zones. Okay, so we did the 20-minute ramp test, and you could do this online or offline. Oh no, sorry. This one is an offline, so you can do this at home. You can do this at home. Number 2 is the 3-minute all out. You can do this outside as long as you have like a long flat strip of pavement. You can track that. And number 3 is a 3-kilometer. So those 2, you can do them online, you can do them offline, you can do them outside. You just need a flat stretch of pavement. You don't want to be going up and down hills. So, because any power output test, that you want to be like a straight line. So like online, it's straight. It's not like, unless you do some crazy hill test that's probably outside of this scope. That's probably based on your trainer or your coach. No, that's number 4. So if you happen to be going into a studio or into like, so like Peak Center, I'm just thinking about them. If you want to do testing, you can go there with your bike and they will facilitate the test. You also have to pay for that. And in conjunction, you can do a lactate threshold test as part of that. And what that is they'll take a prick of blood every 3 minutes and they'll measure your lactate buildup in your blood. However, they've said there's been reports over the years that lactate threshold testing is not accurate because if you have to take it at the precise time, every time, and if you get water in there, it can dilute the blood. So don't bother with the lactate threshold. You can pretty much gauge when you're going to blow up or getting close to it. That's your lactate threshold. Number 5, the MAP test, like I was talking about. So every 3 minutes, you increase 20 watts until you cannot hold your 90 RPM any longer. And then I was talking about online. If you do like Zwift, they have, a couple fast, quick, or longer tests. Like last night, I did a quick test, which is really quick. I didn't last very long. So it's like every minute it goes up, I think it was like 30 watts, 20 watts. Anyways, it was every minute. So if you're going to do something like that, make sure you're good and warmed up, not like me. Okay, so there's your 6, counted up 6, and there might probably other ones that I know of. So number 1 was your 20-minute ramp test. Number 2 was your 3-minute all out. Number 3 was your 3-kilometer all out. Number 4 was going to a test location. Number 5 was the MAP test. So every 3 minutes you add 20 watts. And then the 6th one is online. So you sign up into Zwift and take that. So the purpose of having your heart rate zones and or watt zones, so power output zones. And I always get this questions that when I give clients both of their zones, they're like, well, I was out doing a ride and it was so like I couldn't balance my watts to my heart rate. And you're like, okay. So if you've ever done this, you can't. It's impossible because your heart rate isn't like an on and off switch like your power output is. Do you know what I mean? Like when you stop pedaling, your power output drops. When you start pedaling, your power output increases. You can't drop your heart rate like that and bring it back up. So when I talk to my when I have my 16-week clients, I'm always like, okay, you got both of them. You pick one that you're going to be following. And the one you should follow are your watts, your power output, because that's the one you have the most control over. And then you watch your heart rate. Okay. Like I said, you can't effectively balance the two. It's impossible because your heart rate will go up and it'll stay up there. So once you get your zones, if you've got both of them, focus only on your power numbers. Okay. So, your coach is going to give you, okay, you are going to do a 30-minute ride in zone 2. So your range can be like 120 to 148. So you're just going to ride in there for your hour or whatever. Okay. Or your coach gives you the train at the top of zone 2. Or it could be like train at 65% of your zone 4. So you have to calculate that. You're like, So you know what I mean? So that's where it's super important to understand that you cannot use both of them. But I have seen some, I mean, when you see crazy athletes who can control their heart rate so much and they're so fit that when they stop, it like plummets. That's like 1% of the population. Okay. So it's amazing to see, but it's not going to be you and me. Okay. So, I was just saying, so the best ways is to use power for most control. Because if you're, especially online, if you're doing some training, training plans, it'll say, you're going to go, you plunk in your numbers and say, okay, these intervals you're going to do at these numbers, right? So you have to try and hit them. And it's also, and why do we do these? Well, it's just great information. A lot of people want to know and track their progress. So this is the only way to do it. But also, like I was saying, it prevents overtraining. So getting burnt out, and it prevents undertraining, which is not getting any results or anything better than what you started out with. Because if you were to sit on your bike, say, okay, I'm going to go online, or I'm going to train in my basement by myself. I did an episode about this and how online training or training by yourself can actually prevent you from gaining any kind of results. Because I don't know about you, but if you sit on your trainer, you got no focus in front of you, nothing, you don't have your numbers or anything. And what you're going to do is you're going to zone out, or you're going to play on your phone. And then you're going to be sitting there at you're going to be pedaling at something like ridiculous, like 50 RPM, really slow. You might as well just go sit on the couch, to be honest. So it has to be with purpose. And that's the next one. It's just keeping focused. So if you have numbers, you have your heart rate monitor. So my program, you have to have a heart rate monitor, obviously. You have to have a cadence meter on your bike. Okay, those are the two main things you have to do the program efficiently. You don't have to have power. You have to have one of the two heart rate zones to follow. And cadence is a must, because we are working on speed all the time. Up the hills, down the hills, flats, sprints, and cadence is an amazing tool. I'll tell you a little story. So I used to have a spinning studio from, hold on here, 2001 to 2009. So just take yourself back there, pre-Facebook, pre-social media, pre-power, pre-everything. And so what we did, like our spin bikes did not have cadence on them. We had to count them out for 30 seconds. Like, count your pedal stroke, like your knee goes up and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 15 times 4. Okay, you're in the right zone. So that's what we had to do as spin instructors back then. And then I was able to buy this unit that I could put on my spin bikes that would track cadence, speed, and distance. And then that was like a game changer. We didn't have to count anymore. Like, I could say, okay, everybody bring it up to 90 RPM, because it was on their bikes. And then there's like the revolution of like power meters and everything. Like, holy crap. And it's happened in the last 10 years. Unbelievable, the evolution of power and training. So anyways, be thankful you're sitting where you are right now. So building certain areas. This is another, keep with a why: strength training, endurance base building. And here's the how. That's getting your zones, like getting used to pedaling at 90 RPM. So a lot of people are like, sitting and training at zone 1 or zone 2 are like, my head's gonna fall off. It's so freaking boring. Yeah, but here's the thing. imagine you could be increasing your strength by increasing your gears every time you go and sit on your trainer to go for a 90-minute zone 2 ride. Okay, so let me just say. So zone 2 ride, and you're in the small ring or you're in the big ring, depending on what kind of gear ratio you have at the front. And you start at, say, like a 17 in the back. Okay, so that's like mid-range of your cassette. So you're spinning nicely, 90 RPM, cool, not breaking a sweat, heart rate is zone 2, or your power is in zone 2. And then, so imagine you do that for like a month. You do that a couple times a week for a month. And then the next month, you add a gear. So now you're down to the 15 and you do it again, you keep your 90 RPM. So if you watch your power output and your speed, you're going to be going faster. And then imagine you get down to the 11, big ring, 11, and you can keep a 90 RPM. Imagine what your output would be at zone 2 heart rate. So like that's mind-blowing power right there. You can get that strong to be able to put out that amount of power for that duration in zone 2. Like you see these guys at the Tour de France, like, and they show their heart rates. Like this is immense training. So zone 2 is a powerful place to build your strength. It's not a boring place. If you make it boring, it's going to be boring. Put on Netflix, but then, you know, keep yourself focused. Okay, so I've talked about all that. Let's just go. I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm going to talk about to the best of my abilities so you guys can see this. All righty. Let's just move all this stuff up here. Okay, so what I've done here is, this is the Excel spreadsheet. Excuse me. This is for our test that we did yesterday in my 16-week for the 20-minute. So what the girls did is they, after the 20 minutes, they gave me their their finishing up heart rate. And this is what happens in a test. Really, you work all this, like you work in this test all the way up to the point that you're gonna barf and you can't push 90 RPM anymore and you're done. That is when we take those numbers, like your finishing up heart rate, like it's not going to go any higher, and the highest power output that you got to, and you plunk it into this formula. So, but before we get into that formula, which is down here, this one up here at the top is for people who did not make the test or just were not in attendance. So instead of like doing the test at home, which they can, or if they don't want to, they just, and this is a simple formula, you can find this anywhere. It's your resting heart rate. If you have your resting heart rate, it's the truest heart rate zones you're going to get based on your age. So that's 220 minus your age. This is the, you know, times like 50%. This is, you know, heart rate, top and bottom, bottom and top. But if you add your resting heart rate, it changes. So I'm going to guess mine is like 51. I think it's super small, less, but you'll see here, everything changed because of the calculation. You know, the calculations are right here. Okay, I'm not a whiz at Excel, but I had some help. And that'll be like the truest set of zones that I can get without doing a map test or a functional threshold test. Okay, so that one I did for some ladies who didn't want to do it. It's totally okay, but they have to have a range for the program. because it's useless for them to pay the money to train with me if they don't have things to follow. It's, you know, it would be extremely boring for them, or anybody actually. Okay, so then let's move down here. This is, so we did 2 tests. We did a 20-minute test, and then we had 15 minutes, and then we did a 3-minute test. So the finishing watts for this one test, this is just numbers thrown out, was say, let's just say 2 for, you know, like for ladies new to cycling, 180. So that's my finished wattage at the top, like maxed out. And so if you see, it wrapped right down and gave me a new calculation for my heart rate zones. Okay, I don't think this one needed to change. I think I might have to, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to, okay. And then this one is for the 3 minutes. So if I did like 200, yeah, see, I'm gonna have to change some of these. And then we go to the finishing heart rate, which is, these are the 2 numbers we need. That's what we're working towards, to find these 2 numbers that we can, like, we've been able to push harder. So if I did like my first map test in, you know, November, and then I come back at the end of December, and in November, I finished at 220. And in December, I was able to increase my performance to finish at 240. I've already made huge gains, and I haven't even hit the new year yet. Okay, so in conjunction also, so there's my heart rate. Oh shit, gotta fix all those calculations. You can actually increase the size of your heart by training properly. Now, go to and Google Hunter Allen's. He has 2 episodes with me. We talked about that. Go to his episodes, check that out as well. And, but the more you train your heart, the stronger it's going to get. And you can agree, it's just like any other muscle. So this is kind of, now your zones tell a story. When we used to do our map test, and this is something you can only do inside, you need a partner for this, is that every 3 minutes you track your heart rate. Okay, so if I start at 120 and I finish my 120 at 90 RPM, my heart rate was at like 120. And if I go to, next would be 140, and I finished, my heart rate would have moved up to like 132. So, and then I finished that successfully. I moved up to 160. My heart rate is starting to elevate to 140. So you see how your heart rate, you could track your heart rate as it elevates as you go up in power. And that also tells a coach a lot about your fitness level. Believe it or not, I've been looking on YouTube for information on this for a while, actually, because if you happen to be like you just love climbing hills all the time, you think that's going to give you the endurance and strength, you just ride the big ring all the time, your cadence is below 85, your heart rate, like once put this through, will jump, like you'll see a massive jump like in one increment. So if you can imagine this, like, and then you just say like, this person has no endurance base at all, right? Because they cannot hold, they cannot, like, you know, or their fitness level is just really poor. But, you know, it's one of the two. So because this person just trains like 100% intensity, There's no zone 1 training in there whatsoever. Um, and um, so taking your zones and watching your heart rate move up as you're working harder is a way of looking at your overall fitness. Isn't that cool? So that's why it's really cool to do that with somebody else. Like, you can't do it yourself because you need to write everything down. And at the end, when you're like gonna die and you're finishing off your 3 minutes, you need somebody screaming at you. So, but if you, so it's a really cool piece of data. And I used to do that a lot because when we did in the studio, we would partner up and people would test each other. And then they would be writing down the data and they would send it to me. And I would put it through, and then it kind of gave you a good gauge as to where everybody was at. So that's kind of like wrapping it up. I think I've touched on everything I want to touch on. It's just a lot of information, but at the end of the day, if you've got goals, it's so important and smart to do these tests. I know a lot of people hate them because it completely puts you out of your comfort zone, right? And I always got, like, at the end of my 16-week program, I would have like maybe half, because when they start the program, they have no idea what they're getting into, right? Okay, second class, we're going to do this test. It's going to be, and like, for a lot of people, it's putting them completely out of their comfort zone and they do not like it. And then they don't come back. They've got some sort of excuse for the last test at the second last class. So we test at the end because for me, it's important that people get stronger, right? So we could track progress. So whether you kind of like baselined it all the way through and say at the end, or like we have recorded like 5 to 20% increase in fitness level over 4 months. That's pretty significant. That also means that you're not just training my session, you're also doing additional stuff. And then, I don't even talk about like preparing for this, like rest and hydration and eating properly and, being prepared, to work your hardest for like 20 minutes. So it's like a good event. So anyways, that's that. I think I'm pretty much done. So we'll just finish up with, you have to remember 90 RPM and your 80-20 rule, 80% endurance, 20% intensity, 80% zone 1, zone 2, 20% zone 4, and zone 5. Zone 3, kind of don't go there. The reason being, it's kind of like not zone 2, obviously, and not zone 3. It's kind of like a junky area to train in. You want to have a strong base and a strong upper end. So with that, guys, I hope I chewed off your ear enough. I must get this out to you. And so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you took away some really good information. I hope I explained it well enough that it was not confusing. Again, I always offer up my ear for comments on YouTube, and where I can respond to you there. So, or you can DM me on Instagram, but make sure you follow me on Instagram and also the podcast on Instagram. So with that, have an amazing weekend. Love you guys. And guess what? I just checked today and the downloads are at 999,555. So we are 500 downloads away from 100,000. And I'm going to tell you guys something. If you're still here, like, I started this podcast December 15th, and I'm just like over the moon that I've hit 100,000 downloads. And I've told you before, so appreciate you guys. Thank you for being such amazing listeners and sharers and um, coming back for more. Um, if and I always ask you if you know of someone who would be good for this podcast. I got some really cool interviews lined up for next year. But anyways, love y'all. Have an amazing afternoon and weekend.